It's working.
Yay. Sweet. Awesome. I'm always like kind of waiting to see, is it going? So I'll go ahead and do my introduction.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, everybody. This is Shannon from iEvolveTV, and we're just going to go ahead and get started. We've been, like yesterday, a little late because we get hung up in our, we've both been blessed with the gift of gab, which is probably why we've chosen to broadcast these. So, yeah.
Right.
So Shaman Sean is here with me today, our Norse Pagan Shaman, everybody's favorite Norse Pagan Shaman. From the land of cheese.
Right.
Oh, did you see that my cousin from Norway sent me some brown cheese? Did you see that?
No, I didn't see that.
Yeah. Yes. We might have to break that. I'm sorry I can't share it.
Well,
amazing.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of real good cheese.
It's real good.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I got an education in that real early in life. I think it was about 13. My family traveled through Europe a little bit, and it was pretty cool. My mom got to show me all the things. She lived in Europe previous to this trip, and she gave me a pretty good education on a few things, and learned about beer and some other stuff. Man, it was just super cool. Really cool. Yeah,
it's really awesome.
If you got kids, take them to Europe. It will leave an imprint on them forever, I promise.
That's awesome. But, so yeah, she sent me that, and she sent me a well, she called it a film, a movie, a Yule Christmas movie.
Mm-hmm.
It's over here, and
oh, that's cool.
It's just a postcard.
So
sent me that, and some chocolates that look like M&Ms, and a little note written in English. So that was, I'm sure she had to get that translated. But yeah, she sent me a bunch of stuff. It was a nice little care package. Mm-hmm. So I started collecting some Michigan things because last year we did. I sent her a bunch of last Christmas. I sent her a bunch of like clothes that says, like Great Lakes Unsalted and blah blah blah, that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So now I'm going to send her some like food because she sent me food. So that'd be cool. Let's see, some housekeeping stuff. You and I right now, and then on Tuesday, Jess will be back. We'll do another podcast with the Tibetan Buddhist.
Right on.
All you guys are fun, And yeah, I think that's the only thing on the docket right now. And then Dreama on No BS Friday mornings.
Cool.
She drags my ass out of bed.
Cool.
Well, not really. I'm up, but I'm not usually talking.
Right. So
that's a new skill.
Yeah. Right on.
So you had a fun day yesterday.
Oh, I was up late doing some work. I guess I should start at the beginning. So I'm a Norse pagan shaman, and those words are kind of like placeholders. They're not really exactly precisely accurate to the to the historic whatever, but I'm a contemporary shaman. So what I do is like helping people, empowering people of mind, body, and spirit, or energy, because like a lot of people are like, I don't know about all that spirit stuff, and you might be an atheist, but you understand energy and you understand quantum physics, which is that's exactly what I work with. So it's the same stuff. Mm-hmm. Just different labels and stuff, and evidently labels matter, but which is why I'm trying to define the shaman thing, right? So I've got two major jobs, one of them I was up late working on last night, but the two major scopes of work really. One of them is empowering the mind, body, and spirit of my people, and that's a hell of a lot to work with. It requires like a pretty good understanding of physiology and toxicity and things like that we face in this day and age that probably my ancestors didn't have to deal with at all. And then also, a lot of mental issues, perspective of reality issues that they probably didn't have to deal with either. Conversion of ways of thinking into something that's more healthy instead of something that keeps you a slave. And then of course, the energetic part of it is sort of the esoteric arts and stuff like that. which is a huge scope as well. So all this stuff, I mean, if you're under 40 and you're claiming to do what I'm doing, you're probably full of shit. Or you've been doing some bypassing, or, you're a very, very, very rare human being.
Mm-hmm. Or grew up in it, perhaps.
Sometimes, yeah, sometimes that's the case. And that's really actually extremely rare that somebody grows up in it in a real way,
Yeah.
other than just some of the ways that we'll probably be talking about later in this thing. But so anyway, so I was doing some kind of hardcore ritual work last night, where I was working with a type of remote viewing, and it was really hard work, actually. And my ancestors are probably like, we do that shit all the time, whatever, but like in this day and age, it's a pretty difficult undertaking, and there's not a lot of people teach you how to do it. So you got to develop these skills and develop your consciousness in order to do it. So that's what I was doing last night, actually.
So your client was somewhere else, or there?
Yeah.
Okay.
And this is like, I actually get paid to do this work because I can come up with results that are pretty stellar usually. So yeah,
Right.
Working on some figuring things out, what's really kind of going on for this particular person, and it was good work, and that's about a third of what I do, really, is that kind of work. It seems like these days mostly what I do is teach people how to understand toxicity, and there's mental, physical, and spiritual toxicity in our current day and age that is unparalleled in history. I mean, it's like, there's more narcissists than there ever have been in history, probably, right now. You know what I'm saying? Or at least, a lot of people say, well, we're diagnosing it better. Well, I don't know about that, man. I don't think so. Yeah, I think there's just more of them. I think there's like fucking narc factories somewhere where they're just cranking them out.
Yeah, and it's a range, and it's a very big range.
Yeah, and it's it's really pervasive. It's really big range, and that's sort of like a mental toxicity that is a product of our modern times and the imbalances that we have.
And there's an accepted level of delusion.
Yeah.
Delusion is probably not the right word, of
illusion,
not taking responsibility for your own self, I guess. I don't know, your own, to stay in your own lane. Like that whole boundary thing is very skewed, and there's an accepted level of that.
Yeah, that's very much a product of mass slavery. And here's how this works, right? You get in order to build an empire, you got to have slaves, and the bigger and more powerful your empire, the more slaves you probably have. I mean, this is just a historic observation, right? Well, we are living in one of the most powerful empires that's ever existed in human history, that regular human history that we're aware of, right? So that means there's a shit ton of slaves. And the personality, the psychology of a slave is one of total lack of responsibility, because you just do what you're told, basically. And this is really oversimplified, okay? But so that is lending itself to a circumstance, social circumstance, where nobody has to be responsible for anything. Lots of people are leaning on daddy God, Sky Daddy or government daddy to make all the rules, and as long as they can do whatever they want within the loopholes of those rules. And so the sick part is they just make more and more laws and more rules, and less personal responsibility for anything. Mm-hmm. And it's a destructive spiral. And when empires don't have this kind of shit in check, by decentralizing a little bit, they get over centralized with all these different social, mental, and physical, and even spiritual aspects. That centralization is what pushes this kind of thing to continue to happen. And it's an environment that creates, the environment is the factory of narcs, for example, and victims. Mm-hmm. And, you got this whole, the only thing I think maybe worse than the narcissist, at least they're honestly selfish. You know what I'm saying? So the only thing worse than that is the whole victim control dynamic that people try to apply all the time. And that is just, there's something about that that just makes me throw up a little bit in my mouth and also want to punch a motherfucker in the throat. You
Well,
know?
there's the we probably should have said, hey, by the way, there might be some language in this video.
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm a warrior shaman. I'm not like a priest or anything, guys. So yeah, part of my authenticity is you know, I use words that evoke emotion so that I understand, make sure that you guys get the message. You know, and I think you got the message there. So yeah, yeah. Sailor alert, there's gonna be some words.
There you go. Met with love.
Yeah, totally.
Always,
and
always.
It's really just about honest expression and stuff.
Right.
And you know, I'm just being, you know, the whole reason I'm on here today is because I don't have to be somebody else, and I'm really not interested in being somebody else.
Right.
And that's part of it. I don't you know.
But there's also the covert narcissist. So
oh yeah, totally.
The covert narcissist that will mirror because they see you as somebody that is has some very good virtues and characteristics. So they're going to mirror those aspects of you, but they're not able to maintain that for an extended length of time. And then something trips them up, and then you're like, what? Yeah. And you don't believe that as somebody that's probably not narcissistic, right?
Right.
That's hard. That's a hard, and that's a, you know, that's a painful thing to repeatedly learn.
I think so. Yeah. Yeah. Right. And also it's like in the old world, there's a word for that, and it was called doppelganger. Right. Today we call them pathological liars and sociopaths, but it's the same thing, right?
Yeah. But have you ever listened to The Little Shaman?
No.
That's her specialty, is narcissistic and borderline personalities, type B personalities. Oh, she's fabulous. Cool. Like, you would dig her. Like, I have listed, like, just put her on play because she's so incredibly entertaining and engaging.
Oh, cool.
In this area that, like, it's great.
Soak it up. See, that's actually a historically, that is kind of the earmark of a fantastic shaman or wise woman or wise man, is that ability to teach while entertaining, you know. And that's just so cool. I wish I was better at it. I spent a lot of my life.
You are good at it. You are very good at it.
Well, you know, I try to pay attention to it, but you know, I spent a lot of most of my adult life in warrior culture, and like I said before, I'm a warrior shaman. I'm kind of a little bit more like a drill sergeant than I am like a, you know, people hear the word shaman and they get this idea, and it's not even really the most accurate word to use for what I do. We would call ourselves, or we would be referred to in English, you know, and from Saxon and other linguistic origins, we would be referred to as wizards or witches. All right. But it's been that shit is so co-opted, you know, I can't hear the word wizard without thinking of Disney.
Right.
You know?
Right. Well, so, it's really unfortunate too, because I think what's uniquely understood by the shaman community is that these things then manifest illness.
Yeah.
And disease. Yes. Eventually.
Yeah, they do.
That is, you know, like fundamental to the understanding of these emotions and
totally
what you absorb and hold on at a cellular level.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, as a society, we, as a culture, as a people, we've only taken medicine out of our spiritual realm for a very short period of time. And what good has it done?
Right. Well, it's built some empires. It's made a lot of slaves, and it's built some empires. So that's what it was designed for since about I think 1904 is when all this shit kicked off in the what we refer to now as modern allopathic medicine, which is you know, it's a shame to even call it medicine, really. You know,
not Rockefeller. What's the other the
Rockefeller Foundation, right?
No, that was it's the other R word. The other guy.
Rothschilds.
Yeah. Now I'm confused. Maybe it is Rockefeller. I don't know.
No.
You all know who it is.
No, you had it right. Yeah, Rockefellers are the ones that were engaged in the this stuff all revolves around building monopolies in order to further centralize the society. Okay, so his responsibility and the Rockefellers' Foundation's responsibility was, when you just observationally and breaking it down really simple and quick, the Rockefeller Foundation had a bunch of petrochemical companies,
Right.
okay, invested in them or owned or whatever, and then they were pushing using those companies to make chemical, chemically isolated, patentable medications, right? And then building a system that would sustain selling that, and then eventually creating the laws, massaging the legal system so that only these guys who sell drugs can be called doctors. And they ran out of business all of the healing schools, that were teaching people how to use plants and all that. And then, but these guys were doing the same thing. They were just patenting chemicals that came from the plants. I mean, every medication that you got came from some natural thing on the earth.
Well, they've made
it's not like
synthetically too.
The synthetic stuff that came a little bit later,
right.
But because it's not legal to patent nature. If it was, then we'd be in a nightmare society. But even so, you can only patent it if you can claim that there's a chemical process you got to go through in order to sort of synthesize it, right? Like synthesized aspirin, for example, it's got all these fucked up side effects because it's not a whole chemical. I mean, it's not a whole natural compound. So it's missing the things in it. It has just the active ingredient or a replication of the active ingredient. And it's missing the things that sort of buffer the effects of that active ingredient that come naturally in the plant. And unfortunately right now we're at a place where even that doesn't matter, but I'm really getting off subject here. I was going to say this was going to be quick and everything. So let me get back to what,
okay.
So back in the early 1900s, 1904, I think it was sort of like official. The Rockefeller Foundation bought the chemical companies and essentially bought the universities that were allowed to validate somebody as a doctor or create doctors, right? So they owned both sides of it, right? And that's just, that monopoly is, was made possible by things like the stock market, where you can have, shell companies open that actually own X, Y, and Z in percentages. But, when you figure out who owns those, and who owns those, it comes back to, well, it really is a monopoly. It's just sheltered a couple of like phase lines, sheltered from the real ownership of it. And so the monopolies have continued, of course.
Well, and if you look at agriculture too, like they were.
Oh shit!
That
was the next step.
Another side. So
right, holy shit, yeah, and that's a big deal.
Right.
Where we are with that right now is intense, and this is all shit that you have to learn as a shaman if you're going to be a real contemporary shaman who's responsible to the well-being of your people. Right. This is stuff that you have to understand. So where we are right now, it's gotten so out of control. The petrochemical companies, or just chemical companies, if you want to call them that, like Monsanto and others, they started getting into genetic modifications and things like, just so they could patent seeds, which is just really splitting the hairs with what's legally patentable. But somehow they got it done, right? And so they make minor little changes in the DNA of something, and then they can patent it, which I think is crap, but they do it. And so what they've done is they've made what they call Roundup Ready crops, for example. There's a lot of other things too, but this is just the one that people are most likely to understand or have heard of before. So they got Roundup Ready crops, and you can spray this antibiotic, which is glyphosate, that's Roundup. You can spray that on your crops, and these particular crops are sort of more susceptible to, or less susceptible to, the damage. Allegedly, like, they physically look okay, and the corn physically looks okay, but the nutrient value of it is vastly different than what you would call natural corn, right?
That's why, like, wheat here looks way different than wheat in Europe, because they're not allowed to do that. And that's why, like, I'm sensitive to wheat gluten here, but if I get something from Europe that's not the case, right, I'm fine. Just
well,
because all
and I'm glad you brought that up. That's a very specific example of what's going on here. See, what they do is they spray this glyphosate on crops in order to sort of kill them and get them ready for harvest, just like using Pitocin on on a pregnant woman to induce labor when it's convenient for the doctor, right?
That really grosses me out, by the way.
Yeah, me too. It's disgusting. But and there's some really awful things that happen when
And
you
if
do
you
that.
know what Pitocin comes from,
Go ahead, share. No,
oh
share.
no, I don't even want to say what it's from.
Oh yeah, come on. No, do it. People need to know this. Where does Pitocin come from, Shannon?
Pig semen.
Yep.
Blech.
Right.
Oh no, that's not
And
going in my body.
I don't know why they're using pig semen to do that. But maybe it's because pigs have like a 30-minute long orgasm and it's easy to extract it or something. You're welcome. You're welcome. All right. So what they're doing is they're spraying this stuff on the crops, glyphosate, to kill the crops because you can't, it's not good to harvest it until it's allegedly dead, right? Or, dried up as far as wheat goes. But the problem is they're doing it premature. So the seed doesn't even, the germinating seeds or the wheat itself hasn't completely finished growing in most cases. So you've got an immature product first, which is going to have a reduced nutritional value in addition to the other things. But the glyphosate, it's a water soluble antibiotic, so it gets in the gluten of the wheat, and that's where it accumulates.
Mm-hmm.
So that accumulation in the gluten is making people, and they're calling it a gluten sensitivity. It really isn't. It's a glyphosate sensitivity.
Okay.
Because you can take the same people that have, a gluten sensitivity, right? And you can give them gluten that's never had glyphosate in it, and they don't have a problem with it in most cases.
Right. Well, the other thing that it doesn't bother me too is like if I get bread that is that they use like the real sourdough process, like the 3-day sourdough process, I'm okay. I can't have a ton, but just like one slice, I'm okay.
Right. Yeah. Well, if you get it what I would call a traditional sourdough process, if you have that, and then also you're using wheat that's never had glyphosate in it, I bet you wouldn't have any problems at all.
Yeah. Oh, no, I wouldn't have any problems.
Like a European version of sourdough might be totally fine for you.
No, yeah, it's totally fine. Like just anything from Europe is fine. Like any pasta from Europe is fine.
Right.
There no problems.
I want to say France is one of the countries that, and that doesn't surprise me because in France, culturally, food is taken very, very seriously as it should be. I wish the people in the UK took food as seriously as the French. It'd be a different world, man. But yeah, anyway, I'm not here to bash the food of the British Isles. It does it all by itself. It doesn't need my help.
Yeah, but malt vinegar.
That's not a food though. That's like a condiment, And
but
you got to have something on. You got to put something on fish and chips.
Right, and a lot.
Yeah. But I mean, no, there's some great food out of there. Don't get me wrong. It's just that in general, it's not. It's I mean, kidney pie, really.
Well,
I mean, I don't know.
Mincemeat
it's pretty good. I mean, I've had it. It's not bad. It's just different. Anyway, so this stuff all started happening in the early 1900s, and it got just out of control. Then we got to this point where the food, our food is so lacking in nutrients that it's almost everybody in America, it seems, is suffering from some degree of malnutrition, and we're wondering. We're wondering
eating all the time. You're chubby. Well, you're chubby because you keep trying to eat what your body's asking you for. You're not getting it. Right.
That's part of it. And the other part of it is you're putting things in your body that no eukaryotically human cell understands what to do with. You know what I'm saying? I mean, we've never been exposed to this kind of shit before. We've got, hundreds of thousands of years of being on this planet, and we're all of a sudden trying to eat things that aren't food. And so your body doesn't know what to do with it. In many cases, it turns it into fat cells or stores it somewhere and tries to figure out what to do with it later.
You mean red number 5 isn't a food?
Right. Believe it or not, polysorbate 80 is not a food.
Oh.
As a matter of fact, not only is it not a food, but in a high enough quantity, certainly in your bloodstream, it can sterilize you and it opens up the blood-brain barrier to things that should never be allowed into your blood-brain barrier. And that's one of the, go ahead.
You mean fluoride's not good for my teeth?
You'll have shiny teeth and be really, really, really stupid.
Like if I put extra fluoride on my teeth, is that good for me?
Yeah. It's there's all kinds of, fluoride's a great one because that one crosses a couple of different realms with regard to my work, because I'm trying to help people use their pineal gland and use their consciousness and understand things and be able to see things and bring them back from their experiences, right, to help them grow.
Yeah.
And you can't do that if you got a calcified pineal gland. Now,
people think it's just like it's something that's it's like a real thing.
Yeah, totally.
It really exists.
Yeah, you've got a gland in your body that creates DMT, okay? And that's the thing they're trying to destroy, you know?
Yeah.
Because evidently making mushrooms illegal didn't work, you know? Like, wait a minute, if we make a law, we just need to make a law, you know? Well, how's that working for meth? You know, how's that working for crack? You know, is the law really working that well? Well, they have that same kind of law that they have for crack and for meth. They have it for mushrooms and entheogens.
Right.
And, you know, thankfully, there are enough entheogens on this planet that they can't possibly categorize and illegalize all of them, right?
Now, entheogens are what?
Oh, yeah.
In the mushroom?
Right. Well, there's a variety of different kinds of mushrooms. There's, you know, one of the popular ones nowadays, like super popular, like yuppie popular, is ayahuasca.
Oh, right. Right.
It's like you're not even a shaman unless you've gone to South America. And what? Yeah, that's two. Yeah, it's one is an MAOI, an oral MAOI. It inhibits a certain function, metabolistic function, so that the active ingredient in the other plant can work to give you the DMT. Otherwise, your system, when you consume things by eating or drinking it, if you don't have both of them, then the DMT won't even, your body will sort of destroy the function of the DMT in your body. So you got to have an MAOI to allow it to work. Anyway, so yeah, there's two. That's a combination. But entheogens are anything that, well, I mean, you can kind of guess what it is by, if you know Latin and you understand entheogen. It's a plant that helps you see God, is essentially what the short version of the word etymologically. So we can't have that, because then motherfuckers are going to figure out that they're slaves, and they're not going to want to be slaves, and they're going to figure out their own power. And you know, 380 million Americans that understand their own power is a huge threat to the empire. You know, huge threat, especially, you know, because we live in one of the few countries in the world where you can actually, you actually have the physical means to change the government when it gets out of control. And, you know, I think it's been out of control for a long time and really could use some change. But right. You know, this is part of the reason that that I'm all about, you know, gun rights and stuff is because, you know, I don't want to be a slave, and I don't want anybody else to be a slave. Just because I don't agree with whatever their politics are doesn't mean that I think that they shouldn't have the ability to, the natural ability to defend themselves from anything, you know. And also, I'm one of these guys out here that that took an oath to defend the Constitution from all enemies, foreign and domestic. And a lot of us have, actually. And a lot of people I'm seeing are failing miserably at that. And I feel like I am too sometimes, because I'm like, I need to do something. What do I do? So that's part of the reason that I approach shamanism the way that I do, is because one of the things I can do to honor my oath to the Constitution is empowering people at an individual level, because that will ultimately make powerful groups that have freedom and self-empowerment and responsibility as part of who they are.
But think about how many people you're reaching. You know, I mean,
yeah,
you reach a lot of people.
That's pretty awesome. Maybe I'm not as aware of how many people I'm reaching as what the reality is. You know what I'm saying?
I mean, yeah, I mean, even if somebody catches this video and that activates something, that's reaching them. I had a professor in college. Actually, I've shared this with a friend of mine not too long ago, that she was just really, really fabulous with like creating the classroom community. I mean, that's really the foundation of really any kind of learning environment.
Yeah.
And so, and we asked her one day, like, golly, you spend so much time like doing this, you know, and why aren't you in like an elementary school? Why aren't you doing that? And she said, but think about how many students I'm reaching by teaching you guys how to do it.
Right.
So that's what you're doing, you know?
Yeah, in the military. Yeah, in the military, we call that a force multiplier, and that's the whole mission of.
You're a force multiplier.
Yeah, yeah, and I got that concept from my time working with special forces, U.S. Army Special Forces. The motto is "De oppresso liber." It means to liberate the oppressed, and I kind of feel like that's still what I'm doing, really. And I learned that motto when I was a young teenager, and I always thought to myself, that's a noble pursuit. That's a warrior's pursuit.
It is.
And so, and I still do that. So the two things that I still do is I still practice that function of the the original Green Berets kind of perspective. And then I also
not the raspberry beret.
Well, I mean, whatever, you pick your color. No, the Green Berets are actually that's special forces, and that's the motto that I was talking about. And the other thing is, my oaths are serious to people who understand who and what they are, and so I take that oath seriously. And I've always been a patriot, and but my patriotism isn't to the flag or the government, and never really has been, particularly after all that exposure to how the government works. I'm like, nope. But the people of this country and our heritage,
yes,
and our European heritage even, and our just being the human heritage,
yes,
it's just it's so brilliant and so important. And all these energies that are out there in this world, these really powerful people that are trying to turn us into one gray mass, we can't let that happen. Our diversity, our individuality, all the different tribes that we come from still are alive within us, and showing people how to reach that individual power and the things that make us different are so important, and from a species perspective, the things that make us different are the things that ensure our survival as a species.
Yeah.
So it's really deep in our consciousness and in our beings to want to be able to express ourselves the way that we want to. But that feeling and that energy has been bastardized into a whole bunch of things that are actually destructive and not helpful, like what is it now? Currently we have 843 and a quarter different genders.
I've not heard
that's not the kind of
what?
Right, you know what I'm saying? I mean, you talk to the right person, they'll say, oh, there's so many different, okay, look, that's not the kind of diversity that is helpful for our species, really, but it's like growing pains. We've never been in a cultural reality that's allowed for anything like that before.
Can I interject?
Yeah.
If anybody wanted to read up on, my background is psychology and special education, and really special education is not really that special. It's just good teaching. Okay. So,
right.
Theogens. I'm a really big fan of Carl Jung.
Yeah, me too.
So I have lots on Jung, because he got it right, and he bridged a lot of things in psychology. So
I consider Jung to be one of our first emerging cultural shaman from Northern Europe.
Yeah,
I really do.
Yeah, he's like, oh well, hey, these indigenous cultures have been doing this stuff that psychology thinks that they're inventing. I'm just gonna go study them.
Yeah.
And then I'm just gonna rename it, and we'll put it to the test. I'm gonna study it. I'm gonna, do some experiments. He was smart about that. So
totally.
we first need to mention that DMT can be activated or reactivated or come into your consciousness by meditation.
Yep.
And breath.
Yep.
But if you want to look up more, that's how you spell it. Can you see it?
There it goes. Yeah, I can see it. The first word at the top of the page, entheogens. Yep.
But there's a big old, obviously, write up on there.
Yeah. It's a super interesting subject. And
Iboga?
What's that?
Iboga?
Oh, that's really powerful. Really powerful. Some of these really, when I say powerful, when I'm talking about entheogens, okay, I'm talking about the propensity that an entheogen has to alter your state of consciousness. That propensity is what I'm talking about when I say it's powerful. Like some people say ayahuasca is powerful. I haven't experienced that, yeah. But Iboga will change your reality in a hurry. And
I will not be taking any of this.
Right? Yeah. Well, listen, there's a whole lot of psychological preparation, physical preparation, and spiritual and energetic preparation that really need to happen in order to have a useful experience with these things.
If I can do it in meditation in like about a few moments, I'm not doing this.
Right.
I might blast the top of my head off.
Yeah, no, I got you. And any kind of fear like that, these things are they're not really for traditionally they haven't been for the masses. You know what I'm saying? This isn't stuff that's like, this is really, really strong stuff.
And I think that's why microdosing has become a little bit of a thing that people have a little bit of a chronic thing that they're trying to kind of work through.
That is super useful. Yeah, that is super useful. As a matter of fact, I've had a lot of personal experience with some of my people who have been using microdosing of certain entheogens in order to overcome the physiological effects of traumatic brain injury. And it's been super effective, super effective. And nobody's getting their consciousness altered really, but in these microdoses, the straight up physiological effects for people who are suffering from things like PTSD or traumatic brain injury, and usually those are in combination. And not usually, but I mean, in my world, they're usually in combination. Yes. That is a super effective tool, and it's totally illegal. It's like, how in the hell is that illegal? How is it?
Is it
something? Go ahead.
Well, maybe it's not in Michigan. I think maybe that's it. Or there's been some legislation that's been opening that up. Anyway,
there has been some opening it up, and that's been really, really positive. But that's a huge threat to the pharmaceutical industry, because every time one of these, if you were to legalize psilocybin,
that's what I say, tough noogies.
Yeah, right. Yeah, fuck them. So really, I mean, they're like out of control, man. So if you were to just like straight across the board, all over America, legalize psilocybin, right, which is a schedule, I think it's Schedule 1 drug, where it's like, or Schedule 4, I forgot, whatever the most intense one is, but it's up there with heroin. It's like, but see, we've given these government agencies way too much power to make these determinations. Nobody votes on any of this stuff at all. They can just make it illegal. And then the DEA gets on the DEA's schedule of illegal drugs. And, then there's a war on drugs, and that includes entheogens, which are some of the most promising and least expensive ways for people to deal with things. So let me put it in a monetary context. Okay. Some estimates are saying that if you were to legalize psilocybin, the effect that would have on the pharmaceutical industry and psychiatry alone would be somewhere in the $1.5 to $2 trillion range.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is my personal opinion.
Yeah.
That I don't think it's appropriate for somebody that's not skilled in the ability to shepherd somebody through the spiritual process.
Yeah.
That's my personal opinion. Like,
I totally agree.
If I was open and felt like it was something that would benefit me, I don't. I can do that on my own. But if somebody was walking towards me with a lab coat on that was going to give me something, I'd be like, that would be incredibly scary. That would be that would be like the worst scary thing for me. No, No, because you need somebody that's has the ability to walk through those realms with you and shepherd you through the process to get through that. I'm going to start getting a little emotional right now.
I understand. Yeah.
um, it's a healing process. It's not recreational. You're not playing hacky sack in the park and watching Pink Floyd The Wall. That's not what you're doing.
Well,
right.
But let me tell you something about that process, okay? There's a whole group of folks that that want to have those experiences, okay? And they just haven't had the guidance. You know what I'm saying? And so to that end, I would say, you know, if you don't have the guidance, but you got access to it, go try to learn something. You know what I mean? I'm not against people trying to figure that stuff out. I don't have the luxury of including certain kinds of dogma in my perspective of reality. You know what I mean? It would just, it's just so insidious. But I mean, I clearly understand where you're coming from, and there's a lot of ways to which I agree with you on that, Shannon. But at the same time, you know, the experiences that I had with like with entheogens of different varieties when I was 14 and 15 years old were instrumental in my ability to cope with the circumstances that I was dealing with. And I didn't, no, I understand that I'm not everybody. Okay, I get it. I know that I'm really freaking different.
And if you had your own 14 or 15-year-old now, you would send them to a shaman.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep. Yeah, definitely. That ideally it's better if that's the case. Okay. But the problem is, the biggest problem with that is that shaman and people who fall under that category, they don't have enough regulatory guidance of themselves. In other words, we don't, you know, I went through, I go through this,
yeah.
You know, I'm very, very clear on how I define what I'm willing to refer to as a shaman. You know what I'm saying? And there's like criteria. Nobody else seems to have that.
And what is that? Because there's different areas in which, like I brought up the little shaman. Well, from what I understand, at least what I see, how she's benefited me as a shaman has been her vast knowledge of chronic. What is it? Anyway, the narcissism. The schedule was, I don't know,
she's really talented with what today's world would call psychology.
Yes, exactly. Okay. So
and it's important to say it that way.
I'm not going to call her for Sean stuff.
Right.
But we have to have that awareness. Right.
And as real shaman, real responsible professional shaman and healers of this nature come together more, there's going to be more like, you know, we operate very well within our cultural bubble. Like my cultural bubble is sort of hard ass Norse pagans, veterans, because I'm a warrior shaman. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I can relate to a Marine who's suffering from PTSD and in the throes of it a lot better than say one of these light workers can, because they don't know, they haven't had the experience of diving into their own shadow.
Right.
You know, so
she might have that ability. She might.
Yeah, totally.
I don't know her.
And I wasn't using her as an example.
No, me neither.
I'm just saying, I know a lot of people that claim to be shaman because they've had a couple of entheogenic experiences.
Oh yeah. There is a shaman.
The way I define this.
There's a shaman path though that was kind of
right. And it's been wrecked and it's being rebuilt. Okay. So there's some criteria involved, and let me explain what some of them are.
Yeah.
For me personally, and this is kind of just off the top of my head, I can't remember all the things that I wrote down about this, but I have done some writing on this. You have to have experienced death. You have to have experienced giving birth. You know, like
near death. You have to have that going through the death experience.
To me, it's just like, the death experience. You have to have, you know, died and come back. And I'm not talking about 3 days later on some Lazarus level. I'm saying you have to experience going to, you know, your consciousness essentially being disconnected from your physicalities.
Mm-hmm.
So the death experience, the birth experience, whether that's giving birth yourself or witnessing it, being there when that energetic when that being comes into reality. That's an experience you have to have, as far as I'm concerned, to be the kind of shaman that I would respect. You have to understand the mind. If that means you know, a student of psychology, that's cool, and that's a good first step, but that ain't really understanding the mind necessarily. You know, probably 2% of the psychologists that I've ever encountered or read their material would I say understand it. I get my background in that from you know, dealing with my own shit, but then also being a trained interrogator and a trained investigator.
Which you have to know all that.
Yeah, you learn a lot of shit about psychology when you work undercover.
Yes, you do.
Yeah. So understanding the physical body, you know, in today's world, it's not just enough to understand physiology and the sort of the cutting edge and new developments with those sort of things, but also to understand how it interplays with consciousness, you know, and what's really going on in your body. And, you know, like the fact that you know, a huge portion of your body is actually little beings that weren't born with you, you know, that you've picked up along the way. The idea that 50% of your DNA is from viruses, you know, it's not even what you started with. So, and how that perspective works with the energetic and the spiritual. And then also the understanding, at very least, have a good working understanding of a spiritual reality that is functional. And monotheism ain't it, you know? So if you grew up in monotheism and you studied all these other things, but you haven't broken those monotheistic dogmatic chains, and you're still thinking of the world as if there's a higher world and a lower world and that's it, that ain't going to be good enough for your people. You're going to fall short. So the ultimate laurels, though, is your results. Okay. Since I don't have, well, I actually do have a PhD, but since I don't have a PhD hanging on a wall behind me that supports the shaman work, or, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Since I don't have that, I actually have to provide results.
Right.
The results are it. Like nothing else fucking matters, you know?
Right. So like, you have to have those things. You have to go experience that, the birth and the death experience.
Yeah.
Usually it's a title that somebody has bestowed upon you, and not just one person, but people start calling you that. And then you're like, oh, maybe this is my path. And it's something that you kind of, it's almost like being called teacher. Wow, you're really good at teaching me this. You're really good at,
and that's another thing, you know,
you're really good at healing. And so you finally kind of come to that realization, like, oh my gosh, I'm a shaman. Oh, that's how you become a shaman. It's
that's
not
how
like,
the first ones, that's how the first ones develop. And then ideally, the first ones who show up on the scene are responsible, in addition to all the other shit, are responsible for developing a tradition of building new shaman. In other words, the rituals and activities that support all those things that I mentioned, and then also teaching them, you know, you got to understand how to tell stories. You got to understand how to communicate, hopefully in more than one language, you know, at least two.
I know sign language.
What's that?
I know sign language.
Cool. ASL's great. That's cool. So you have to understand, you got to be a good teacher. You got to have communication skills. You got to have the charisma that people will listen to you. And like, when you're telling, you can tell people the right stuff, but if you don't do it right, they're not going to have any value, you know? And the last thing, probably most importantly, that I think most shaman are missing is that there is a really good value to people having a certain degree of fear of you, like what you can do, who you are, and all that kind of stuff. And for me, a lot of that comes from being a warrior shaman, which is a very sort of specific kind of thing, but that's what my ancient culture and my ancestors were. So that's why it meshes. But the very most important thing to be in this role is your connection to your ancestors. They have to agree, and not just agree, but they sort of have to meet you halfway with becoming this. It's impossible to become this without the approval and the necessity of your folk soul. So you can learn somebody else's basically the techniques of their shamanism, right? But I don't think that it's responsible to call yourself a shaman until you know where you come from, and you know who you are, you know who your people are, And most of us have a lot of variety of that. So we should be able to figure it out, you know?
Yeah. And there's a lot of actually writers that I would consider well versed on those things, and but I don't necessarily, but they write on maybe perhaps something that I guess I would consider outside of their lineage, or there's, but
Right.
there, I mean, I guess the cultures, like their practices usually overlap.
Right. And that defeats the necessity. That defeats the necessity for authenticity within your own blood.
Yeah.
You know, and then also your own soil, because if you don't live in Peru, the land spirits and the energy and the energy that comes out of the earth from that particular place in the world doesn't apply to you. And if your ancestors aren't there, that also doesn't apply to you. So what you're doing is sort of like spiritual bypassing. You're learning the mentalism of these things, and maybe even practicing certain techniques, but you know, your blood isn't in it and your feet aren't on the soil that operates that way. So there's differences, and those subtle differences have to be understood if you want to call yourself a shaman, I think.
Yeah. But I think that's kind of interesting that they do that. I mean, I just, you take it and you just apply it to your own culture.
Well, it's a good step in the right direction. It's better than nothing, you know, but it's not enough, you know. And if I had the opportunity to go travel around the world and learn other people's means of shamanism, that would be cool. But I don't think that I would be that interested in it, because I'm rather interested in doing it than observing it. You know?
Yeah.
That's why I don't watch football.
Right.
You know, I just no interest. Like, I don't even have a football bat, you know?
A football bat?
Yeah, isn't that what they use?
Yes.
Yeah.
They use a football bat.
Or a cricket racket.
Yes. I don't really know cricket, but okay, so was that
it's a parallel joke. Whatever. Anyway.
I get it. So was that so you did I was gonna use so you did Project Looking Glass last night.
Oh yeah, you could say that.
It kind of
you know, not on that scale, or not as retarded as they do it. You know, actually the Russians do this a lot better. And what's interesting about that is the Russians who are engaging in this stuff, their culture is closer linked to my tribal ancestral culture than most Americans are.
Right.
That was always in the back of my mind. I'm like, why? Because when I joined the army, it was still a Cold War, you know? So I always used to think to myself, why are we fighting? Why are we, you know, from an individual perspective and a cultural perspective, these guys should not be our enemies. I do not understand this. And then, but it was because I didn't understand who I really was within the American thing, you know.
Is that when you really kind of starting to like wake up a little bit, like you're stirring?
Yeah, exactly. And then I discovered that we're actually Rome, and then it all made a lot more sense.
Right. So is that all that you wanted to share about your experience last night? That you're
it's okay. So it was actually kind of boring in some ways. It wasn't the super exciting version of it. The difficulty was actually in its
you had to mentally move across realms, essentially, conscious
totally
dimensions. People might like think of it more as dimensions, like our culture would say realms.
Yeah, that's right.
So if we relate them to dimensions, maybe that would be a little bit more they bring more.
You got to know your audience, because different ways of describing this are going to make sense to some people and not to others. It's kind of like taking it's kind of like jumping out of an airplane over the top of something that you want to look at. You know, except you don't have to take your body with you, so you don't have to bring a lot of gear. You know, you're sort of when you get really good at understanding how to use your consciousness for various different things, eventually remote viewing is one of the things that you start doing. It starts happening a lot earlier than most people think, and it's not that difficult, but it requires a high degree of discernment so that you understand the difference between what you're creatively making up and what you're creatively interpreting. And it works on this premise, okay? Objective reality is a series of frequency energies and, you know, flashes of light and nothing real. Okay, true objective reality is not what we would consider reality at all. Okay, and it's really hard to understand. So luckily, our consciousness has adapted to that circumstance by giving us creativity. And creativity is the language that we use to translate objective reality into something that we can understand and function within. Okay. Now, because we have creativity, we can also like just basically make shit up. Okay. So understanding the difference between making shit up and recognizing a less subjective reality is where the skill is in this thing. And if you kept track of all that as I described it, then you're doing really good, and you're probably capable of doing this. But it's you know, it's not like incredibly difficult skill. It can be taught to just about anybody, and most people have the natural ability to do it anyway. You know,
or you just don't realize that they're doing it.
Right, right. It's a form of hamramer or shape shifting, actually.
Yeah.
Hamramer is what's
Hamramer.
Hamramer. That's an old Norse conjunction of words that is that means basically shape shifting or moving your consciousness into another thing or another place. So, like some of our ancestors may have shape shifted into birds in order to see a bird's eye view of the battlefield, for example, right?
A good example of that would be Game of Thrones. When
oh yeah, perfect. Yeah, that's exactly it. No, that's precisely. Yep.
Was that kid, the crippled kid? That kid.
He was not just him, but one of the guys.
And he was in the Raven.
Yeah, not just him, but actually the guy that was doing it more closely to what I'm talking about was one of the guys from north of the wall, you know, and he could roll his head. You would see him rolling his eyes back in his head, and then he would move his consciousness to this Raven.
Yeah, that's the kid. That's the kid. That's the kid.
No, it's not a kid. This guy was a warrior.
Okay.
But the stuff that the kid had was actually premonition kind of video, or not video, premonition kind of visual perspectives. But he also did transport himself. Yeah, we're getting into real detail here. You're talking about. I divide up because like there is a difference between these things, but really what I'm doing here is splitting hairs, and it's probably boring to most people.
Okay, you catch who you're going to catch in your net. That's all right.
Yeah. That's cool. That's cool. But anyway, so there was this warrior, and he was from the northern tribes, and they came as they were coming down. There was this scene where he moves his consciousness out of his body. He kind of sort of collapses a little bit, or like, you know, goes into a trance state, and moves his consciousness to the bird, and then he can see the battlefield and see kind of the terrain ahead of them and sort of how they need to make their decisions. Mm-hmm. So this is not new at all. And by the time these guys started thinking about, by the time the CIA and all these other folks started using remote viewing, you know, we'd been doing it for thousands of years. They were just trying to make it a little bit more palatable to the military by making it a little bit more scientific. But ultimately what they found out was that some people can do it and some people can't, and has more to do with their state of consciousness and their ability to use their consciousness.
Right.
It does.
Which was why.
Yeah, it's not some mechanical process where you just feed somebody some drugs, turn on a certain sound, and then.
Which goes back to why the Nazis wanted certain people to do certain things.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because he wanted to identify who had what genetic code to do certain things.
Right. They were looking for genetic predisposition for certain kinds of stuff. And they were really, and we do that today as well. That's still going on. You know.
Yes, sir. And, it takes this is stuff that just is, people don't know. People don't know.
I know.
This is what happens, you know. And it's not necessarily good or bad. Everybody has their own, like, you know, when you talk about the magic that's, you know, I can't even say the word, bestowed upon, you know, certain groups of people. Yeah. It's kind of like the same thing. It's not like it's not necessarily good or bad well, it is good or bad, whatever. It just was, that's what they were after.
Right. Yeah. It's to me, it's all just fascinating because you know, the little boy inside me is actually kind of like a little scientist running through the world, looking at things and just observing and trying to, you know, and that part of me is very much still alive. So I don't I try to look at things in a more objective. I try to look at things without trying to dismiss them in an effort to not be tricked, you know? Like my ego is not associated with being right or wrong. My intellect is associated with it, but I keep my intellect and my ego separate, and I've found that's really, really helpful. You know,
Right.
I'm not really, really proud of all the things I know. I mean, the more that I learn, the more that I understand I don't know that much. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like, oh my God, there's so much. How am I ever gonna catch up? You know? And you know, shamanism is very much that way. And so is it's the same thing if you're a doctor or if you're a psychologist or an astronaut or any of these things. We just don't know that much. And there's a lot of people out there that practice something called scientism, and those people think they got it all figured out, and they're just really annoying and hard to deal with. But unfortunately, that belief system, and that's what it is, it's a belief system. It's an association between science and authority that doesn't really exist, because you can't mandate scientific understanding. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
You can't manifest the realities of science. It's all about observation. And so, you know, the people that are, oh, the science is settled, oh, we know this, we know that. Well, no, we really never do. Here's a perfect example, and this will blow everybody's mind. It certainly blew my mind when I first discovered it. There's a theory that that seems to be pretty solid, that viruses are not actually pathogens at all. Viruses are actually communication, like parcels of communication, like little bitty emails, if you will, between single-celled organisms. And you know, and the other thing that supports that that's fantastic is that in the air around you right now, whoever you are watching this right now, in the air around you, there is 10 to the 31st power, approximately, of viruses, like individual viruses. That's a huge, huge, huge number. So in order to put it in context, that's 10 million times more than the number of stars in the known universe currently. Like,
it's amazing.
If viruses were pathogens, if they were here to wipe us out, we wouldn't stand a chance. And the other fascinating thing about that is 50% of your DNA is given to you from viruses.
Right. So it's like, basically it's like activation so that you can continue to evolve into the environment that is, well, in your environment. So you continue to evolve. That's why we evolve. Well, I guess I'm going to say from apes, but I don't know, whatever.
Well, you know, it doesn't matter where you call it. I mean, you could say amoebas, and that would probably be accurate too. Maybe the most.
Whatever we evolved from, but we continue to adjust to our, adjust to our environment as new things are introduced.
Yeah, and that's what it is. They're like updates. Okay, they're like little updates, right? And what they do is they give each new cell that's about to be produced, because we lose billions of cells all the time and create new ones, right? With the adult mast cell is what I'm talking about. And a mast cell doesn't know what it's going to become until it gets in the environment where it's going to be. And then it responds to external stimulus of a huge variety. One of those varieties we think is well, there's another word for what I'm calling viruses, but it's called oh shit, I lost it. I knew what it was. Anyway, so the these little packets of information, they share updates, right? And that gives us a little bit more DNA flexibility. In other words, viruses are freedom. Okay, they're giving each cell more options to deal with or alter for their environment. And a lot of people don't understand this, but DNA is not like a specific program and it makes you a specific machine. DNA, most of our DNA is there as options.
Right. So whatever you decide to express.
As a cell, yes. Right. Yeah, right. And the more options you have, the better your chances of survival as an individual, right? And also, therefore, as a species. So the whole idea of reducing that function is like totally counterproductive, okay? And you know, I would like very much because like we've got these theories out there. We got germ theory and terrain theory, right? And they're kind of in opposition a little bit. Both theories have some merit, but germ theory is out there saying basically the way germ theory is being practiced is in ignorance of the terrain theory aspects, which is this. They're like, if you get if you get exposed to any kind of pathogen, you are going to get a disease, right? And that's patently false.
No.
Every single human has a different state of being that will dictate whether or not they're going to suffer from any kind of infection.
Mm-hmm.
Some people's immune system, it's not just the immune system. That's a very, very, very small part of it, even though that's a huge, really misunderstood system. You got the immune system and all these other things that are part of that. So, and that's where terrain theory really shines, is like, what's the state of the human? Is this person having, properly, do they have proper nutrition? Right. Do they meditate? Are they generally happy or generally miserable? Are they in a combat circumstance?
That they're going to get it? Have they convinced themselves that they're going to get it if they don't wear
totally, it? Yeah. The psychological aspect is 100%. It's like, that's so important. Yeah. Those are all factors.
Well, and like when I think that even in the 80s, people knew this, like chickenpox. That's a good example, because most of us have lived through that era, right? Now, I had a friend that really suffered some terrible things at the hands of chickenpox, so I don't want to be insensitive to that. Okay, well, she was pregnant and she lost her twins.
Yeah, that's an awful time to have it. It's much better if you have it when you're a kid.
Yes.
And these fucking vaccines that they have, they don't give you lifelong immunity from anything. They don't give you immunity from anything. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So that doesn't help. You got to like, so, but if you get if you get naturally exposed to it.
Right. But our parents would like expose,
right.
Oh, my kids have chickenpox. Let's everybody expose their kids to the chickenpox. It's not deadly, at least at that point in time. So everybody get the chickenpox.
Yeah.
You're going to be, pocky for a little while, and then you're
barely
fine.
Even an inconvenience for most people.
And then you're fine, and you've got the the immunity because you've kind of or kind of, but so you're good.
Right.
They knew that even in the 80s. It's kind of like the same idea.
They've known that for thousands of years.
Yeah.
Like literally, hundreds of thousands of years.
I think what messes things up is when they make it. They make it in a lab and they patent it and they pre-order the test kits.
Yeah.
And then they say, beware, don't die, wear a mask, comply. That's when people get a little, then they buy it.
Here's the thing though, you don't even have to make it in a lab. You don't have to make it at all. You can just.
I'm not making shit.
Well, okay. You know how they do things in like the whole, I got to back up because this thing is really about definitions. Okay. This whole thing is about definitions.
Hello.
So this whole thing is about definitions, right? So what you have to understand is that they can, and people they've understood how to use this in language for thousands and thousands of years. The folks that build empires, right? We have a whole legal system where the words sound like English, but they're absolutely not. Their definitions are different than the English words, even though they sound like it. And it's set up that way for a reason. Well, you can do the same thing with science. You can define something in a specific way without really actually having to show any real honest results. And many times we don't even have the ability to draw those sort of conclusions, right? So you can define something in a certain way, use a specific test and claim that identifies it as a certain thing, and then ascribe whatever symptoms to the disease that allegedly is caused by this pathogen, okay? And you just change the definitions just slightly, and you can create a pandemic out of nothing. You can create it out of a practically unknown flu, or you know what I'm saying?
Well, in pandemic, people are like, oh, it's a pandemic. That's not numbers. That's geographical space. So if somebody has the flu across the county, and so do you, and like everybody's getting the flu at the same time because it's December or I don't know, February or March, it's a pandemic.
Right. Well, listen though, here's the thing. people don't know the definitions, and our education, our social responsibility to education and understanding proper communication at the general level has deteriorated so greatly that we don't know what we're talking about, even though we're saying the words.
Yeah,
So
they don't.
let me explain.
And if you
So
look it up, the
yeah.
definition has been intentionally changed. But if you look at like the history of what, yeah, anyway.
No, you're right. That's exactly where I was headed with it too.
I'm sorry.
No, that's cool. That's exactly, we're tracking on this. So you change the definitions moderately, or you allow connotative definitions to gain widespread use via things like yeah, internet and social media. This is one of the insidious things about social media and how it's destructive to our linguistic expressions. You know what I'm saying? And people don't notice it. It's like, because we're in it. But if you back out and look at 100-year difference in how the language can change by just how much it's changed in the last 10 years with the advent of connotative social media definitions and internet definitions that are not accurate to the real definitions, then you've got major media outlets using all these words that sound real scary, and you think you know what it means, but you don't know what it means, because pandemic etymologically means something completely different than its actual specific meaning in accordance with pathology.
Right.
It's a very specific meaning in pathology, and it has certain requirements in order for it to actually be that. But you don't know that, and I don't know that. I mean, I do, but you know what I'm saying?
I do know that.
It's general. Right.
I took medical terminology, and so I'm like, okay, whatever.
Yeah, right. Not everybody has. And frankly, most of the people who go through that stuff don't memorize it. It's temporary memory stuff. They got to go look it up again, just like we would have to look it up again. So in order in
epidemic would be what they want us to react to. But that's not what they've ever called it.
Right. I know. Never.
Ever.
Right. And it doesn't satisfy the requirements to be an epidemic.
Correct.
Autism does, but we're not going to call that an epidemic. We're going to call that a genetic thing, even though it's not. By definition, and back to the definitions, you can't have a genetic epidemic. They're conflicting definitions.
But is there a gene? I don't believe that, because I've had plenty of students with autism, diagnosed with autism.
Sure.
There's not a gene that, I mean, there might be a marker. I don't know that there's a gene that has been identified.
Well, no gene can cause it. That's the thing.
Right. It's not like Down syndrome where there's an extra chromosome.
Right. That's a different thing too. Probably also having, there are physiological responses at the cellular level to our environment in just about all cases.
Okay, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, like perfect storm kind of thing, right? Yeah. So, but yeah, no, you can't have an epidemic that is also genetic. Otherwise, our species wouldn't exist. You see what I'm saying?
Well, they're trying to make us transhumanism, so.
Well, we essentially, this is scary. By legal definition, if a corporation gives you something that changes your DNA, then you fall under the genetically modified organism.
Correct. And you have to agree to it. So if you're like, sure, I'll take that, hit me up.
Yeah.
All right, you agreed.
Then what? They own you then? You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
I mean,
because
I don't know.
you agreed. You said,
how does that work?
I sign on the dotted line. Stick me.
Yeah. I used to think about that stuff because I'm big into sci-fi. I love sci-fi, man. I always have, all of it, just like really all of it. And Altered Carbon is this show that came out recently. If you guys haven't seen it, watch it. Super cool show. But it talks, there's a section in there where they're dealing with the legal aspect of moving your consciousness to a skin, to a new body.
Yes.
Right. And like, who ons what?
Well,
like
probably once you're like signing over to, then they have access to your files. Like, I mean, just like Google.
Yeah.
You can access all your your pictures and your files, all that.
Sure. And like you think, and I love how people are like, they think they own their Facebook profile. Like it's my profile. No. It's not your fucking profile, man.
No.
You
better get that stuff. It's not yours. Yeah. You better download it.
So, yeah, and this goes back to definitions again, and why definitions in linguistics are so freaking important. I mean, as a psychologist or as you know, being anywhere in the psychology industry, you're familiar with neuro-linguistic programming, so you
Yes.
have to understand how important words can actually be, and
Very.
more important than the words is the definitions we apply to them.
Mhm.
You know, because you can sit down and try to have a conversation with somebody in a language that you don't know, and it has practically no value. But we have these associations, connotative and denotative attachments to words that produce, like, actually can produce a chemical response depending on the word. Like, you know, like part of the reason they don't like, some people don't like for me to use certain words is because of that. And they don't even know that. They don't even know why.
Right.
You know?
Well, I've worked in a center-based school for years and years. So I had students who, you know, even though they, you know, English was not a second language for them, it was just not a language that they were able to necessarily speak. So there's a difference between me being able to speak a language and understand a language, or
totally, yeah.
There's a difference between language and speech.
Yes.
So even though they were maybe young adults, so understanding how they communicate, sometimes it was guttural. So, but we would have a routine. And so it would be hard for me to pull back and say, okay, well, you have to communicate more to me, because I know what you're trying to communicate to me, because I energetically understood, or, you know, I could anticipate, you know, of a classroom of maybe 10, 12, 15, because I got to know them as humans, as people.
Right.
And that's not necessarily a spoken language.
Well, there's more to it. This is I'm glad you brought this up, because one of the things that when you develop your consciousness to a certain extent, you understand that you're delivering energy.
Correct.
Okay. So one of the things that I've been really playing with, especially on the internet, but also in person, and this is a useful tool for interrogators and anybody else who's trying to help somebody alter their state of reality, right? Teachers actually would have the best use of this, but the ability to understand and correlate an energetic flow of information while simultaneously wrapping it in words. And that is what things like skaldic poetry are about.
Yes.
And songs, as the reason they call songs spells, is because there's energy and it's wrapped in lyrical words, and you can memorize that shit verbatim, you know, whereas a whole history book, yeah, you got to keep the book, right? But if it's delivered to you in song and there's a tempo, it's very, very difficult to unintentionally change that.
That's why bards were important to our people,
yes,
because they had an oral history that remained accurate.
Right. And it becomes accurate because you can only make a certain combination of words work correctly with a certain tempo and beat and certain tones. And all of those things together develop an emotional sort of response and an energetic response that imprints. So that's why you can remember, you know, commercial jingles from the 1980s.
Right.
You know, as awful as that is.
Mikey likes it. Mikey likes, he eats everything.
Mom, use Tide. It gets out the dirt that kids get into. You know, use Zest. It's the eye opener. I could do this for hours. You know, ridiculous.
Yeah. So my great four greats grandmother has a bard written for her.
Wow, that's awesome.
60 stanzas. You know, so by stanzas, like little, you know, stanzas, like, you know, a little paragraph. You know, so 60 of them. 60. It's called The Girl from Howendal.
That is incredible.
Yeah. It was written by a famous bard. His name was Geis Bardson. He was considered the Robin Hood of Norway.
Right on. That's super cool. We should talk about that next time. I'd like to know more about that.
There's some ancestor karma right there. Veneration.
Yeah, our word for karma is really actually the best expression of it is orlog.
Yeah, then you got to explain orlog. So I just say karma.
Well, you got to explain karma anyway. Most people think justice is karma, and they're dipshits. They don't know what they're talking about. They've never cracked a book on karma to understand that. You know, they don't know what karma is, and how can you understand karma without understanding dharma? You know?
You do good dharma, you get good karma.
Right. I mean, it's just kind of simple. But you know, so Dharma for us is Hamanya.
Yeah.
And it's described a slightly different way, but you know, there's a lot of similarities between the Vedic traditions and the Northern European traditions, and a lot of that has to do with us coming from having some of the same origins. You know,
Well, we are the Vedas.
Proto-Indo-European migrations.
Aren't we the Vedas, or we're the Aryan? So there's some kind of blending. Like those are like actually people. I think the Vedas are actually people.
Yeah, they're also stories, and they're also skalds, and that's how that all kind of ties in. It's the same spiritual.
I got the Vedas right over there. I've got the whole book.
Yeah, yeah, that's freaking cool, and you can glean a lot from. Those are the kind of things that we can use as a comparative to help us understand some of the obscure or missing parts, or give us a good direction to go look in the massive amount of material and stuff that we're trying to find about our own ancestry, regardless of where you're coming from.
Yeah.
So, well, I gotta go potty, and I gotta go eat, and I gotta get on with it today.
Yeah, thank you for the chat.
Yeah, this has been really cool. I hope folks enjoy this. These long form discussions are so much more interesting because you don't have to. Jordan Peterson talked about this. He was like, you know,
I love him.
Yeah, I do too. He says, you know, you can't. Some of these concepts that we talk about can't be broken down to a 30-minute thing. It can't be broken down. You know, it takes a long conversation to do this, and I just personally like to think that people are smart enough and have the attention span. Lots of people do. I mean, we've proven that. I mean, how many of us can sit down in front of a mini series and like binge watch it? You know, like 6 or 8 seasons, just watching it all day long, and you can stick with it. The attention span's good.
Well, I think there's things that people want to know about too, and I don't know that you know, I'm kind of new here, you know. I'm new here.
Wherever here is.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Where is here? I don't know. Maybe this is a new realm. I don't know.
Right.
We've created one. And so, you know, like, I would love to hear, like, hey, what do you want to know? What do you want to know about the Norse traditions? What do you want to know about the realms? What do you want to know about the gods? How is that different from monotheistic?
Monotheism, yeah.
Theism, yeah. And what did monotheism actually kind of try to guess pretend to kind of be actually?
And what influence has it had on what influence has it had on our people over the past 700 years versus who we were before that, you know?
Well, made us dualistic.
For one, there's about 40 different really important dogmatic things that changed from the pagan mindset to the you know, to the sky daddy mindset.
Yeah. So there's a lot, but I mean, I would love to know what people would like.
Yeah, me too.
And then
why don't you guys tell us?
Yeah, if they're still with us, if anybody's still with us.
If you made it to this point, you got problems. You got problems.
And I was gonna whip one of these out and see what you say about one of these cards.
That's cool.
Do it?
What's that?
Want me to pull one of these cards for you?
Not right now. I gotta go pee.
Oh, okay. My dad and I do that. Play that game. Dad, what do you have to say?
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, I'd actually, I want to know more about those though. So I'll reach out to you later.
Well, there's a book.
Oh, shit.
So
of course there's a book.
So
that's cool.
We just do one.
Right.
And we don't, you know, it's divination cards. We just read it. It's fun. It's like flashcards. It's a game.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, you know, runes or whatever. So anyway, runes aren't a game. I'm just saying.
Runes are serious.
Okay. Anyway, thank you so much, Sean. Well,
absolutely.
Let me know when you're want to come back, get back together, come back. I don't know.
Yeah.
You know what I mean.
Yeah, this is cool. This is a good conversation. I'm glad we had. Thank you so much. And I hope all you guys watching this enjoy this.
Yes.
If you want to see more of it or you want to see something specific, reach out to us and tell us what your thoughts are, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, we're fun, right? Shannon. We didn't talk about maybe I can't say the word, Nuadi, the Sami. We didn't talk about
the Sami shaman. We can talk about that next time.
Yeah, that's cool because we started talking about your shamanism, and I don't know, we rabbit holes into something. Who knows?
Well, it's not my shamanism. It actually belongs to the people that I give it to. I'm just a facilitator that way. I'm not, it's not about my ego or any kind
That's
of show.
right. That's right. And I think that was a good point.
Yeah.
Did good with that.
Cool.
Thank you.
Right on.
Have a good
So thank you all.
day. Enjoy
Have
your
a great day,
afternoon.
Shannon. I
You
look forward
too.
to talking to you again soon.
All right. Good night or afternoon. I don't know. I don't know where we are. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Or good afternoon, everybody. I'm still doing it. Bye, everybody.